Today, we are focusing on one of the most, culturally disruptive and globally influential phenomena of the last few decades.
We really are.
We're talking about the community that has grown up around Japanese animation, or anime.
And of course, Japanese comics and graphic novels, which are known as manga.
That's right. So for this, we're going to be doing an in-depth exploration of the sources you provided, charting the remarkable transformation of this fandom.
And our goal here is to really move beyond just the simple statistics. We want to understand the historical origins, the shifting demographics, and the technological and cultural gravity that pulled this from a niche hobby into a defining feature of global pop culture.
It's a huge story. We're basically tracking the journey from these small fan clubs, exchanging grainy VHS takes,
All the way to a multi-billion-dollar industry that profoundly influences youth identity all over the world.
Exactly. And I think to truly understand the present scale of it all, the global conventions, the streaming wars, the cultural clout, we have to start by defining the central, and I think often contested, term for intense dedication in this space.
We have to. We're talking about otaku.
Otaku.
It's just so central to this discussion. The word itself, it has a fascinating linguistic evolution.
Right.
It originally derived from a Japanese honorific term. It meant something like another's house or family.
So it's very formal.
Extremely formal. It was also used as a polite second-person pronoun, sort of like saying your family home. It implied a certain guidance.
So it started as a term of respect and distance, which makes its modern usage as slang, even more of a cultural term.
Precisely. The modern slang usage, which you often see transcribed in katakana, it emerged within creative circles back in the 1980s.
And it was animators themselves who started using it, right?
That's the story. Early influential animators like Haruhiko Mikomoto and Shuji Kawamori were reportedly using it among themselves.
How were they using it?
As an honorific pronoun when addressing colleagues. This was back in the late 1970s. But the term was really thrust into the public consciousness by the essayist Akio Nakamori.
In that famous 1983 series.
Exactly. An investigation of otaku, published in Manga Buriko. He essentially codified it.
So Nakamori basically defined a whole new sociological category.
He did, but the public reception, especially as we moved into the 1990s, turned sharply negative.
So it became an insult.
A very strong one. The term became highly pejorative and offensive. It started carrying this implication of obsessive interest coupled with, significant social ineptitude.
So it was like the Japanese equivalent of how geek or nerd were used in the West, but maybe even more derogatory.
That's a good comparison. It suggested someone so completely engrossed in their hobby that they just failed to integrate socially.
Yet since the turn of the millennium, and particularly outside of Japan, we've seen this positive reclamation of that label. Fans wear it as a badge of honor.
And that shift is what creates the modern identity conflict we see today.
A conflict? How so?
Well, while many fans, especially in the US and Europe, now use otaku positively to signify deep passion, the older foundational generation often views this reclamation with a lot of suspicion.
Interesting.
The sources really highlight the powerful critique from figures like Toshi Okada. He's known as the Otaking.
The king of otakus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And his issue with the new generation of self-proclaimed otakus is quite nuanced.
So what's his argument?
He suggests that these newer fans, they lack the necessary passion and research sense that defined the original movement.
The research sense.
For Okada, true otaku status required this deep, almost scholarly investigation into a specific subculture. You had to know the mechanics of a particular robot, or the obscure history of a genre, or the creative lineage of a specific studio.
It wasn't just about watching the shows.
Not at all. He claims that many modern fans are just common consumers who overspend on commercial products. They're missing that defining characteristic of obsessive investigative research.
That's a fascinating internal gatekeeping mechanism.
Huh.
It's drawing a line between being a dedicated consumer and being a true cultural researcher.
It is. It suggests that knowledge and intellectual investment, not just how much merchandise you buy, are the defining factors for that original otaku identity. It speaks to the seriousness with which the original devotees viewed their interest.
Almost like it was an academic discipline for them.
You could say that.
Okay, so let's unpack the historical journey. To get to where we are now, with this mainstream availability, the fandom had to overcome some huge logistical barriers.
It did, and that journey began with collective action in Japan.
Not in the West.
No. The foundational moments of this global movement started right in Japan with grassroots activism in the 1970s. The community essentially formed as a lobby group.
For what?
Fans of the series, space battleship Yamato successfully organized to get the show put back on Japanese television after its broadcast was halted.
Wow.
This established the precedent that an organized fan effort could directly influence media output. It was a huge moment.
And that energy, that kind of passionate self-advocacy, then spreads internationally. But on the English language side, the roots were in a completely different subculture.
That's right. In the English-speaking world, the fandom began in the 1970s as a quiet offshoot of the science fiction community.
So it wasn't its own thing yet.
Not at all. Anime and manga just weren't available commercially. So fans who traveled or maybe had contacts in Japan would bring back imported material, often manga, and they'd share it at sci-fi conventions.
The first actual organized group.
That was the Cartoon Fantasy Organization. It was established in Los Angeles back in 1977.
And from there, researchers like Jill Poitras have helpfully categorized the U.S. fandom's growth into these distinct generations.
Yes, and Poitras's model is excellent because it ties these key generational shifts to specific titles that acted as cultural triggers.
A particular show would define an entire wave of fans.
Exactly. The very first was what he calls the Astro Boy generation. This introduced Japanese animated series to a mass Western audience.
But no one knew it was Japanese.
Yeah. For the most part, no. Most viewers didn't even realize it. It provided exposure, but it didn't create that self-aware, hardcore fan community that followed.
Then came the audience who started noticing the patterns, right? The ones who started proactively searching for the source.
That's the early fans generation. Shows like Speed Racer, Eighth Man, and Battle of the Planets were key here.
Because they just looked different.
They did. These viewers consciously recognized the visual and narrative differences, the unique character designs, the specific animation style, and they began to actively take the initiative to seek out more content, realizing this was a distinct foreign product.
So the next phase must have required a new level of commitment from the viewer, moving away from those self-contained cartoons.
It did. That's the Yamato, or as it was known in the U.S., the Star Blazers generation. This was around 1979-1980.
And this group was critical because of the story structure.
Absolutely. The narrative structure was key. Yamato was a continuous, serialized space opera. Unlike traditional American cartoons, if you missed an episode, you lost the entire plot thread.
So it demanded loyalty.
It mandated strong viewer loyalty and consistent viewing. This created a much deeper, more committed form of fandom than anything that had come before.
And the true inflection point for recognizing the product as uniquely Japanese. When did that happen?
That distinction really arrived with the Robotech generation around 1985.
Ah, Robotech.
Robotech itself was this fascinating localization challenge. They stitched together 3 completely distinct, unrelated Japanese shows.
Macross was one of them.
Yes, Super Dimension Fortress Macross, Super Dimension Cavalry Southern Cross, and Genesis Climber Maspida. They wove them into one cohesive, epic story for the American market.
Which is an incredible feat of editing and writing.
It is, and this generation, seeing the complexity, the scale, and the dramatic maturity of the final product, widely recognized anime as a distinct Japanese cultural export, something fundamentally different from local animation efforts.
So we've moved from passive exposure to proactive seeking to committed viewing, and then finally to recognizing the cultural origin. But before the big mid-90s boom, there was another wave, a slightly more isolated one, tied to highbrow cinema.
That was the Akira generation, starting in 1989.
The movie?
Yes. Akira premiered in U.S. art theaters, and it developed a tremendous cult following. It showed this high-budget, sophisticated, very adult side of Japanese animation that deeply impressed Western critics and mature audiences.
But it was a bit of a standalone for many of those fans.
It was. For many of them, Akira remained an isolated masterpiece. It often overshadowed the broader context of the anime and manga ecosystem it came from. So they loved Akira, but they didn't necessarily embrace the larger fandom culture.
And then the mid-1990s came and just shattered the existing demographic structure entirely.
Completely. The arrival of the Sailor Moon generation around 1995 fundamentally changed the profile of organized fandom overnight.
How so? What was the big shift?
The prior generations, the Yamato and Robotech fans, were predominantly college-age males. Sailor Moon, once it was adapted into English, captured the attention of grade schoolers, and critically, it brought a massive influx of female fans into organized fandom spaces like conventions.
So it just blew the doors open demographically.
It did. This diversification was absolutely crucial for the long-term health and cultural reach of the community.
That transition from an almost technical, male-dominated niche to this diverse, inclusive, and younger cultural interest seems key to understanding where we are today. So where are we now, generationally?
We are in what could be called the continuous otaku generation, a term that, as we discussed, now applies more broadly.
And the main difference is the flow of new fans.
The defining difference today is the consistency of that influx. In the past, fan growth happened in these distinct waves tied to major hits. Now it's a continuous, steady stream.
Which reflects the medium's mainstream availability on all these digital platforms.
Exactly. The market no longer has to wait for a single mega hit to trigger growth. New fans are arriving all the time.
And to really appreciate that shift in availability, we have to look back at the incredible effort those early generations went through just to see the content. It's a story of scarcity driving extreme dedication.
It absolutely was. Marathon viewing sessions are a decades-old tradition, and they were a direct response to that scarcity, dating all the way back to the late 1970s and 1980s.
Right, because you couldn't just turn on the TV or click a link.
Not at all. An early American cosplayer noted that content was, and I quote, incredibly difficult to come by.
So if you wanted to watch, you had to find a person who had the tape, often imported from Japan, and then share the physical effort of viewing.
Precisely. A dedicated fan would import or somehow acquire physical VHS tapes, and then groups would get together, often in someone's cramped apartment, for these marathon viewing sessions.
And this tradition scaled up into conventions.
It scaled up rapidly. You have events like BayCon in 1986, which hosted a legendary 80-hour continuous anime marathon.
80 hours.
80 hours. Think about that. That wasn't just a fun weekend. That was an endurance challenge born out of sheer necessity. It shows how profoundly that shared struggle and scarcity intensified the community bonds.
In a way that easy modern streaming just can't replicate.
It can't. And that scarcity also fostered this amazing technological workaround, the fan sub.
Right, the fan-made subtitles.
So origin of fan subs is a crucial part of the story. Before official licensing and translation were common, fans who managed to get a hold of these raw, imported copies of anime films or series would take on the extremely labor-intensive task of translating and subtitling them themselves.
And this whole movement was just fueled by pure passion.
Pure passion. It was compensating for the complete failure of the legal distribution channels to meet the consumer demand that was clearly there.
That technical dedication really laid the groundwork for the eventual legitimized market. So let's look at the U.S. market milestones, where business finally began to catch up to all that fan effort.
Well, the first major technological step, according to Mike Tatsugawa, who founded the Society for the Promotion of Japanese Animation, it wasn't a product, it was the advent of the internet in the 1980s. It revolutionized communication, and critically, it made it easier to exchange those fan-subtitled tapes and higher quality versions of anime, improving access beyond just your local club meeting.
But the industry itself, they still weren't convinced the market was commercially viable yet.
Not until 1992. That year, a company called U.S. Renditions released the first ever English subtitled anime videotape, Gunbuster.
And it was a success.
Its success was unexpected and incredibly influential. The source says it triggered a flurry of releases in its wake. It showed distributors that a market did exist for unedited, subtitled Japanese content. It proved its commercial viability.
However, the attempts to take anime truly mainstream in the mid-90s, they had some very public false starts.
They did. Following the success of Power Rangers in 1993, U.S. broadcasters tried syndicating Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z. This was around 1995 and 1996.
And it didn't work initially.
Their initial relative failure suggested to industry outsiders that anime just wouldn't stick. The localization process was often too extreme.
They edited it too much.
They edited out mature themes, removed almost all evidence of the material's Japanese origin, which often diluted the core appeal. Many people who watched these early broadcasts didn't even realize they were watching anime.
So what was the definitive moment?
Oh.
The one that broke the mainstream barrier for good?
The game changer was the syndication of Pokémon in 1998.
So, of course.
Pokémon served as irrefutable proof to U.S. broadcasters and distributors that Japanese media could not only succeed, but it could become a massive cultural phenomenon in the American market.
Its ubiquity just normalized the whole concept.
It did, and ironically, it was only after Pokémon and Power Rangers left their peak mainstream position that U.S. audiences widely became aware of the genre's Japanese origins. That prompted the next wave of fans to seek out more authentic material.
Now, this story isn't just an American one. The global expansion has its own distinct timeline and, in some cases, cultural clashes. Let's look at the Philippines, which had exceptionally early exposure.
The Philippines received anime very, very early. A station called GMA7 aired Voltes V way back in 1978.
And it was a huge hit.
It quickly created a widespread love for the super robot genre. This genre, featuring these giant, often morally complex piloted robots, it just resonated immediately with the youth there.
And the popularity was so great, it actually triggered a political intervention, which is just remarkable for a children's show.
It really speaks to the perceived cultural power of the medium.
Yeah.
In 1979, President Ferdinand Marcos banned Voltes V along with other airing anime just 4 episodes before its planned conclusion.
Why? What was the reason given?
The cited reasons were violence and warlike themes. But the key point from the source is that this act of censorship, it failed to hinder the growing love for anime and manga throughout the Philippines.
If anything, the controversy probably fueled interest.
You'd have to imagine, the sheer cultural power required to trigger a dictatorial ban on a children's show is a remarkable testament to the medium's resonance. It proves this was never just light entertainment.
That's powerful evidence of the medium's subversive appeal. Now, turning to Europe, they seem to adopt it earlier than the U.S., often through these stealth co-productions.
Yes. Europe showed interest starting in the 1970s. Co-productions like Heidi and Vicky the Viking were hugely popular.
And people might not have even known they were Japanese productions.
The Japanese origins weren't always foregrounded, no, but they acclimated European audiences to the distinct Japanese animation style. Italy, Spain, and France showed the earliest and most sustained interest.
Why them specifically?
Largely because Japanese animation offered high output at a much lower cost compared to U.S. animation. Italy, in fact, imported the most Japanese animation outside of Japan itself.
And what were the dominant genres there in Europe?
They adopted the super robot genre early, so think UFO Robot Grindizer and Mazinger Z, but they diversified quickly, embracing space opera, shoujo or young girls shows like Candy Candy and Rosa Versailles, and even sports anime like Captain Tsubasa.
And Germany was the outlier.
Germany was a notable outlier, yes. They initially resisted the medium, only truly warming up in the 1990s when cable television availability brought series like Queen Millennia and Rosa Versailles to wider audiences.
Finally, let's look at Latin America and focus on Mexico, where the cultural adoption seems uniquely deep.
In Latin America, Japanese shows were marketed as children's television starting in the 1970s, very similar to the U.S. But over the subsequent decades, Japanese popular culture saw a major rise in Mexico, leading to the formation of localized fan spaces where people openly identified as otaku.
And this leads us back to the power of a single character, Son Goku from Dragon Ball. The cultural resonance there is just immense.
It's phenomenal. Son Goku became a highly popular cultural figure. His character and his narrative arc resonated so deeply despite his foreign origin.
And this cultural integration is highly visible in fan-created works mentioned in the source material.
Absolutely. Things like a taqueria in Oaxaca named Tacos Goku and a web series titled Dr. Goku.
So it's not just fandom, it's becoming part of the local fabric.
These fan-made works and commercial references demonstrate that many Mexican otaku have completely absorbed the anime style and characters into their local cultural identity. They're treating Goku not as a foreign import, but as an adopted hero.
That's a powerful example of media globalization. Let's transition now to the demographics of this community today. Who is watching, and what does the data tell us about the future consumer landscape?
The demographic profile confirms that this is now a mainstream global phenomenon, especially among younger consumers. The 2025 Dentsu report offers some staggering figures on global engagement.
Oh, staggering.
Across the U.S., EMEA, and APAC regions, 50% of Gen Zs and 48% of millennials report watching anime at least weekly.
Half of the primary consumer base is engaging with this content every single week. The U.S. numbers back this up too.
They do. A 2024 Polygon survey found that in the US, 42% of Gen Zs and 25% of millennials watch weekly. But what's truly compelling is the self-identification.
The otaku label again.
A Dentsu US survey focused on young Americans found that a substantial 34% of US Gen Z, which equates to roughly 15 million people, openly acknowledge themselves as anime otaku. That's a huge self-identifying cultural block.
And this deep interest starts extremely young in Japan as well.
Absolutely. A 2018 Japanese nationwide survey revealed that 72.4% of youth aged 15-19 reported a high level of interest in anime.
Wow.
Now, that interest does taper off with age. It drops to 38.7% for those aged 50-59, but the high early engagement suggests the long-term cultural foundation is being built.
So are the older fans simply dropping off, or is this becoming a lifelong commitment for those who started during the earlier waves?
The research points to high commitment. A global study commissioned by Crunchyroll found that older fans are highly committed. Over half of millennials and 54% of Gen X fans reported having watched anime for over a decade.
So this isn't a fad for these cohorts.
No, it's a sustained long-term media preference.
Okay, so looking at gender, we saw the Sailor Moon generation diversify the fandom. What does the current snapshot look like?
Well, the overall 2022 Morning Consult data still suggests the general fandom is majority male. That's 61% male, 39% female.
Okay.
But the physical community spaces, they tell a story of greater parity. A 2014 survey found that attendance at North American anime conventions is split 50-50 between men and women.
So the most active, engaged fans are balanced.
It suggests that the actively organized, deeply involved segment of the fandom has achieved gender balance, even if casual consumption leans slightly male.
But perhaps the most revealing demographic data point is the connection to sexual orientation, particularly within that Gen Z cohort.
The Polygon 2024 data is really eye-opening here. It reveals that 27% of American anime fans overall identify as LGBTQ+M.
Which is already a high proportion.
It is. But if you isolate that to the Gen Z fan demographic, the proportion jumps significantly. 39% identify as LGBTQ+, compared to 57% heterosexual.
That is a staggering statistic. I mean, how do we even start to interpret the implication of such high resonance within that specific youth demographic?
It suggests that the content, with its emphasis on complex personal relationships, nuanced identity exploration, and often ambiguous morality, provides narratives that deeply reflect the lived experiences or interests of LGBTQ+ youth more effectively than many traditional mainstream media offerings.
So it's speaking to them in a way other media isn't.
It speaks to the content's ability to allow viewers to explore non-traditional identities and relationships in a sympathetic or adventurous context.
And just to complete the picture, what does the ethnic breakdown look like in the U.S.? This confirms its broad cross-cultural reach.
According to the Morning Consult 2022 survey for American anime fans, the distribution is 47% white, 28% Hispanic, 18% Black, and 7% Asian.
So it's a truly diverse consumer base.
It underscores why this is a mass market phenomenon that transcends the niche boundaries of earlier generations.
Now we have the who and the how much. Let's move to the why. What specific artistic and narrative elements make this content so compelling that it drives this level of dedication and identity formation?
The key differentiating factor that fans always cite is the artistic and narrative depth, especially when compared to most Western animation.
The visual style.
The visual style is huge. One fan noted enjoying that. Visually, there is no dividing line between special effects and what is real. It's just the way somebody imagined it.
That's a great way to put it.
It refers to that incredible freedom from realistic constraints, a visual imagination unconstrained by needing to look like the real world.
But the appeal goes deeper than just the visuals. It's about the characters.
Absolutely. The characters are consistently described by fans as having real personalities, their own feelings and motivations for their actions, strengths, and flaws.
They're not just black and white, good versus evil.
Not typically, no. They feel complex, flawed, and more human, which allows viewers to identify with their struggles on a much deeper level. This realism stands in stark contrast to the traditional U.S. animation focus, which historically treated animation primarily as a medium for children.
Right. Anime explicitly addresses subjects for both adults and children, often within the same series.
It does, and from a structural standpoint, the way the story is packaged is fundamentally different, and that fosters long-term sustained loyalty.
You're talking about serialization.
That's the serialization factor, and it's a huge structural appeal. Most major anime television shows employ a continuous, multi-episode or multi-season story arc. This is fundamentally distinct from the traditional episodic, self-contained formats that dominated American television for decades.
We saw that with the Yamato generation.
It's the same principle. Serialization creates excitement, it requires consistent viewing, and it builds a sustained engagement model that makes fans feel like they are investing in an epic journey alongside the characters.
And that sustained investment translates directly into a profound emotional connection, which the recent survey data really highlights.
The Polygon 2024 survey confirms this intensity. A remarkable 65% of surveyed anime fans find it more emotionally compelling than other media they consume.
65%.
And for the critical Gen Z audience, almost two-thirds stated they emotionally connect better with anime than they do with traditional media forms.
If the emotional connection is that strong, it's not surprising that it bleeds over into identity and cultural influence.
The data is unequivocal on this. Over 50% of surveyed Gen Z fans reported that anime influences their identity, their fashion choices, and their understanding of social dynamics.
Half a generation.
When half a generation reports that a foreign medium is shaping who they are, it moves far beyond entertainment and becomes a core cultural influence.
And the character connection is part of that.
Yeah, it is. Just to underline the intensity of that character connection, 44% of viewers admitted they have developed a crush on an anime character. This underscores the power of these narrative arcs to create genuinely beloved, aspirational, or relatable figures.
Given that intense emotional connection, we have to talk about one of the most contentious elements within this medium. It's something that can challenge that connection, especially during localization.
We have to talk about fan service.
Right. Fan service.
By definition, fan service is material that is intentionally inserted to please the audience, and it's a very broad term.
So it's not just one thing.
No. This includes things like exciting, visually stunning events that have little plot consequence, like massive explosions or extended battle scenes.
But in common English usage, the term often focuses on sexually provocative or revealing scenes.
That is the sensitive context we must address, yes. The term frequently refers to content designed to offer a kind of sexual titillation.
And this is where the cultural clash between Japan and the U.S. often becomes most visible.
It is. When anime and manga are localized by U.S. companies, the original works are frequently edited to remove or tone down some of this fan service. It reflected difference in cultural values and standards regarding appropriate material, especially for younger audiences.
And this editing often becomes a source of tension between hardcore fans who prefer the authentic, unedited Japanese version and the local distributors.
Exactly. It ties directly into the authenticity debate. Some older critics even joke that the prevalence of fan service indicates a lack of maturity within parts of the fandom, prioritizing gratuitous imagery over narrative coherence. But for consumers, the editing raises serious questions about cultural integrity and censorship.
Moving on to consumption, the landscape is shifting rapidly. The way people watch dubbed versus subtitled audio is changing with the rise of global streaming.
We are seeing a very gradual but significant global shift toward dubbed audio.
Really, the subs versus dubs debate feels eternal.
It is, but the data points to a change. This is largely a reflection of increased accessibility, drawing in more casual viewers who prefer the convenience of watching without having to read subtitles.
So the big streaming platforms are driving this.
Yes. Netflix, for instance, reports that a substantial majority of its international anime audience, estimated to be between 80% and 90%, now watches with dubbed audio. In certain specific markets, like the UK, dubs are sometimes even slightly more popular than subtitled versions.
This represents a massive change from the early days when fan subs were the only option and authenticity was everything.
It's a direct consequence of the mainstreaming of the content. However, the old preferences still persist. Longtime and dedicated fans often maintain a strong, almost philosophical preference for subtitled anime.
And their reasoning is about authenticity.
The reasoning is that subtitling preserves the original vocal performances, the precise timing of comedic delivery, and the overall perceived authenticity of the creator's original vision. The convenience of dubbing primarily appeals to the newer, less invested casual audience.
Now we arrive at one of the most fascinating aspects of this community: the fandom's historical role as a driver of technology and innovation.
And this innovation was often created out of sheer necessity and technical ambition. It was fundamentally driven by the initial failure of the market to provide legal access.
Back to the scarcity problem.
In the early 2000s, before widespread legal streaming, roughly 68% of fans obtained anime through downloading from the internet or sharing with friends. This high demand for content led the community to become pioneers.
In what way?
They drove some of the most sophisticated advances in peer-to-peer or P2P software development. They needed to make searching for, transferring, and sharing these large files faster and more efficient.
So the fans weren't just using existing piracy tools, they were essentially building a sophisticated technical infrastructure to fulfill their own media needs.
They were, out of necessity. Their hunger for media inspired the creation of specific technology solutions. Consider a program called Virtual Dub. This highly functional video capture and processing utility was originally created specifically for use on a film adaptation of Sailor Moon.
Why?
Commercial video software at the time often struggled to handle the specific, non-standard frame rates and compression formats that were common in early anime imports. So fans had to essentially create their own editing and processing pipeline.
And the playback challenge was just as complex, right? Getting the files to even play on your computer.
Absolutely. The Combined Community Codec Pack, or CCCP, became essential. It was created specifically for the playback of anime fan subs.
Because the files use strange codecs.
The imported media used specialized, often obscure codecs that mainstream Western media players just couldn't read. The CCCP solved this by bundling all the necessary components into one easily installable package. Fans effectively had to build their own viewing infrastructure because the industry hadn't standardized the formats.
This ingenuity extended into creation tools and even image processing, didn't it?
It did. The fan interest in creating their own media, particularly visual narratives, led to a creator known as PyTom creating RenPy.
What's that?
It's an open-source software engine designed to allow the creation of visual novels, which are incredibly popular in Japan, without requiring any prior programming background. It lowered the barrier to entry for fan-created narrative games.
And more recently, they've been working with AI.
More recently, fan communities have been at the forefront of applying machine learning. They develop specialized image upscaling tools using artificial intelligence, things like Waifu2X, Big JPG, and Anime 4K.
And these were specifically designed for anime.
Specifically designed to improve the quality of older, low-resolution anime images and make them look better on modern high-definition displays.
It sounds like the fans have repeatedly been ahead of the curve in media technology development. But with legal streaming's dominance, the original driver for all this, fan subs, has now largely faded.
That's correct. Fan sub practices have rapidly declined since the early 2010s. The commercial response was just too swift and comprehensive.
The streaming services caught up.
Legal streaming services like Netflix, Crunchyroll, and Hulu began simulcasting new series. They often made them available legally within hours of their domestic release in Japan. This swift, high-quality legal access largely rendered fan subs obsolete for new content, directing that passion into different avenues.
So moving from digital technology to creative output, the concept of fan labor in this community includes a massive parallel commercial ecosystem.
Yes, known as doujin.
Can you define that?
Doujin refers to fan-made creations. This includes original manga, novels, games, music, or anime that are openly bought and sold commercially without being backed by a traditional publisher. It's a highly robust, semi-professional layer of the ecosystem.
That presents a fascinating legal and creative paradox. How does an industry allow its fans to commercially profit from creations, often based on their own intellectual property?
It's a crucial aspect of the Japanese media market.
Yeah.
While doujin operates without a publisher, it exists largely because the major IP holders in Japan have historically tolerated it.
They just look the other way.
They seem to view it as a healthy training ground and a major creative feeder system for the legitimate industry, rather than purely as piracy.
And the scale of this creative economy is enormous, and it's tied to major physical events.
The central hub for this is Comic Market, or Comiket, which is held in Tokyo. It is the oldest and largest doujin event in the world.
And the attendance numbers are huge.
The sheer scale is staggering. Comic Market 97, held in December 2019, attracted approximately 750,000 visitors. This number just illustrates the immense economic and creative power that this parallel fan-made market generates annually.
Beyond technology and commerce, the fandom has had a quantifiable and lasting impact on global language learning and cultural curiosity.
It really has. Anime and manga are perhaps the single biggest motivators for young people globally to study the Japanese language.
More than business interests.
As far back as 2004, a professor noted a major cultural shift in student motivations. Students were no longer primarily interested in Japanese for business majors, which had been the trend a decade prior.
So what do they want to learn it for?
Instead, they wanted to learn Japanese to focus on, and I'm quoting here, translating Japanese pop song lyrics and talk excitedly about the Japanese anime character Sakura Kinomoto. One specific school reported that about 60% of its students were studying Japanese primarily because of anime.
And this language interest directly fuels the translation conflict we touched on earlier, the preference for fan subs over official localization.
It's the core of the authenticity debate. Many hardcore fans prefer fan subs because they genuinely believe the official localization process compromises the integrity of the work.
They feel it degrades the quality.
That it degrades the quality, loses subtle jokes or puns, or whitewashes cultural nuances. They are actively seeking what they see as a purer form of Japanese culture. This explains why such a high proportion of fans express at least a passing desire to learn the language, even if they never enroll in formal classes.
And that demand for authenticity has actually changed the professional translation market itself.
It has influenced professional hiring, yes. The source notes that fluent English speakers who possess sufficient Japanese knowledge are often preferred for professional translation roles over fluent Japanese speakers who know sufficient English.
Why is that?
This preference stems from the fact that the latter group can often produce stiff, unnatural English syntax, whereas fluent English speakers with an understanding of Japanese are better positioned to capture the nuance while ensuring smooth, natural dialogue for the target audience. This need often draws talent directly from the fan communities themselves.
And this cultural curiosity extends beyond just the language mechanics to specific cultural practices.
Fans learn specific aspects of Japanese culture, most commonly the use of honorifics like san, arian, or sama directly from the media they consume.
And publishers have noticed this.
Publishers recognize this profound interest in authenticity and have responded by actively supporting that cultural education. Companies like Del Rey Manga often add extensive explanatory editor's notes to their manga volumes, describing the meaning and proper usage of honorifics and other concepts that do not translate cleanly between languages.
Finally, we need to bridge the gap between the virtual, the digital, the translated community, and the physical reality, the practice of visiting the real-life settings of fictional works in Japan.
This is a growing cultural phenomenon known as Seichi Junrei.
Or sacred ground pilgrimage.
Exactly. It's the practice of visiting real-life locations that were used as direct settings or inspirations for scenes in an anime or manga. For fans, it's a way of merging the fictional world with reality, validating their emotional connection to the narrative.
And there are specific towns known for this.
Shirai Town, for example, became famous as a sacred place for fans of the show Girls and Panzer.
This fan-driven tourism has now spurred the Japanese tourism industry to formally adapt to it.
Absolutely. Japanese travel agencies are now actively capitalizing on this demand by offering specialized anime tours. Companies like Pop Japan Travel, which was founded in 2003, help customers navigate Japan's content industry.
What do these tours offer?
They organize visits to animation studios, museums, and even facilitate meetings with artists and creators, transforming fan pilgrimage into a structured commercial product.
Let's focus on a few of the major destinations for fans making this pilgrimage.
Akihabara in Tokyo is universally recognized as Electric Town. It is the central commercial hub and primary shopping district for otaku merchandise.
So that's the first stop for most people.
It's where you go to find everything related to the culture. It also hosts the Tokyo Anime Center, which functions as a cultural nexus, organizing diverse events including exhibitions, talk shows with voice actors, and public radio program recordings.
And for the major artistic studios, what are the key pilgrimage sites?
The Ghibli Museum in Mitaka is a classic destination, showcasing the celebrated work of Studio Ghibli. And it's not just an art museum.
No.
It successfully combines elements of a children's museum, a technology museum, and a fine arts gallery. It features beloved items like the life-sized replica of the cat bus from My Neighbor Totoro.
And for those interested in the history and craft of manga specifically,
The Kyoto International Manga Museum serves as the repository for the medium's history. It holds an immense collection, approximately 250,000 pieces.
Oh.
ranging from historical Edo prints all the way to popular modern series. And crucially, the museum often allows visitors to observe manga artists working and even pay for consultations on their own drawing skills, making it a live, interactive cultural center.
We also need to mention the physical hubs that reflect the specific gender demographics we discussed, the ones that cater directly to the female fan base.
Yes, Odom Road in Tokyo is a vital cultural center specifically aimed at women and girls. It's a major physical shopping area that stocks manga and anime with a heavy focus on genres like yaoi.
Male-male romance.
Right. It's a key example of how different fan segments have successfully carved out dedicated commercial and physical hubs to reflect their specific interests within the larger community.
So we've thoroughly charted this journey. From a handful of activists and sci-fi enthusiasts exchanging grainy imported tapes, through technological innovation born from piracy, all the way to a globally recognized, culturally significant community. The transformation is just profound.
It is truly one of the most remarkable modern cultural phenomena. What began as these small, often isolated fan clubs dedicated to difficult-to-acquire media evolved through sheer passion.
And driven by necessity.
We saw how technology, driven by fan necessity, advanced from early fan subs and P2P software to today's AI upscaling tools and sophisticated streaming platforms. The community itself has grown from the purely exposure-based Astro Boy generation to the Gen Z otaku who see anime as a fundamental building block of their identity.
So their collective demand is shaping the market.
Their collective demand for complex, serialized, and emotionally dubbed narratives is not just consuming culture. It's actively shaping global technological advancement and profoundly influencing personal and cultural identity on a massive scale.
And that profound cultural influence is the central point. The data shows this is far more than just a passing entertainment trend. Anime and manga are now deeply integrated into the cultural and emotional landscape of young audiences worldwide.
They're driving language learning, shaping social understanding, even influencing personal style.
So given the high percentage of Gen Z who report that anime influences their identity, their fashion, and their social understanding, we are left with a final provocative question for you to consider. What future cultural shifts in media consumption, narrative structure, and global communication might we see as this massive, highly dedicated, and emotionally connected generation continues to age and gain even greater influence?
A powerful thought to consider indeed.
Thank you for joining us for this analysis of the global anime and manga fandom.
It was an important exploration of modern global culture.
Thanks for listening.